public hearing for the inquiry into the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the tourism and event sectors continues. Please ensure that mobile phones are switched to silent and that any background noise is minimised. I wish to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners, and I pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. My name's Ember Erdogan and I'm chair of the committee, and I'd like to introduce my fellow committee members, Mr. Lee Talamas, Mr. David Davis, Mr. Andy Medic, Mrs. Wendy Lovell, Mr. Mark Jepp, Mr. Tim Quilty, Mr. Rod Barton and Mrs. Beverly MacArthur. Mrs. Dr. Catherine Cumming. We have a large lineup of committee members present today. To witnesses, all evidence taken at this hearing is protected by parliamentary privilege as provided by the Constitution Act 1975 and further subject to the provisions of the Legislative Council standing orders. Therefore, the information you provide during the hearing is protected by law. However, any comment repeated outside the hearing may not be protected. Any deliberately false evidence or misleading of the committee may be considered the contempt of Parliament. All evidence is being recorded and you'll be provided for a proof version of the transcript following the hearing. Transcripts will ultimately be made public on the committee's website. We welcome your opening comments, but ask that they be kept to a maximum of 5 to 10 minutes to allow plenty of time for discussion and questions. Could you please start by stating your name for the Hansard and then begin your presentation? Over to you, Susan.
Good morning. My name is Sue Ryman Kiernan. I'm the Managing Director of Wise Connections. Established in 1998, we're an award-winning Victorian conference and event management business. We're part of the business events industry, and as an industry, we're the people behind just about every event you've been to, be it a TED Talk, an industry association conference, or even a political party conference. We coordinate the presenters, the staging, the lighting, entertainment, branding, catering, the lot. We bring together dozens and dozens of people to deliver the events that our community values. At Wise Connections, we specialise in business events, working with corporate and association, not-for-profit clients across a wide range of industry sectors, including government, construction, education, intelligence, banking, medical and legal. Whether the events are large or small, whether they're B2B or B2C, they all drive growth for our clients and for the economy. The portfolio of events we manage includes conferences, seminars, business summits, exhibitions and large-scale awards. These have been in-person events, but in March 2020, our business world turned on its head when the magnitude of the global pandemic started to be felt in Australia. Within the space of 2 weeks, every single event we had on our books was cancelled or postponed. On the 13th of March, we were on site managing an event, and in the subsequent 15 months, we've had no face-to-face events at all. In fact, many of the events that were initially pushed from 2020 to 21 have now been pushed back further to 2022. In order to survive, at Wise Connections, we reduced the hours of everyone down to 3 days a week for much of the year, much of 2020. This would not have shown up in the unemployment figures, but our team were underemployed and some struggling financially. We worked with many clients to move their events online so they could continue engagement with their business communities. The small amounts of income we earned from this, coupled with JobKeeper and the Victorian Business Grants, meant we survived. But many of our industry colleagues have not been quite so fortunate. June 2021 was looking hopeful with the return of face-to-face events imminent. As a Victorian business, we manage events all over Australia, and this month our team was due to be delivering a series of events across the country. With the lockdown in Victoria and the lockout from other states, these events are now in danger. So last Wednesday and Thursday, we basically spent working out how we could ensure the events still occurred without us on site to manage them. And we're very fortunate that our clients trust us enough to make new plans which involve us working remotely. It's a brave new world. On Friday, or last Friday, a major B2C exhibition scheduled for July that we've been working on for more than 12 months was postponed as nervous exhibitors started to pull out. This not only impacts Wise Connections, but also our not-for-profit client, the venue, the exhibition company, the AV company, the caterers, the logistics company, the security company, and so on and so on. And of course, this in turn impacts the people who work in these businesses. And this is not just about Wise Connections. I'm here to represent the broader industry, and the Victorian business event industry has been devastated by the COVID crisis. As conference and event managers, we generally spend 12 to 18 months working on planning events, organising marketing, ticketing, education programs, logistics, and so on and so on. So when we suddenly cancel an event that's been months in the planning, it's not simple. We must unravel a web of contracts and plans, and then if we're lucky, try and put it back together again. Many businesses and many lives are impacted. So since March 2020, we've spent thousands of unbillable hours cancelling, rebooking, replanning, rebudgeting, changing plans only to have them change again and again. The stress of this on the team, coupled with the uncertainty of what the next days, weeks, months will hold, is sometimes crippling. And we're getting through it by supporting each other. This type of support is also what's keeping the Victorian event industry alive. We're a close network of professionals who've been providing advice support to each other. Sometimes it's been an ear to listen to, while other times it's been much needed advice on where to turn for information. Pre-COVID, the Victorian business event industry consisted of 120,000 events. We were 10 times the size of the Victorian music festival industry and 10 times the size of the Victorian major events industry. We're not insignificant. The events we manage in Victoria are collectively worth $12 billion, or about 1/3 of the national $3.7 billion industry. There is a growing understanding that the event industry is not part of the tourism industry. Wise Connections and our business event industry colleagues don't organise visits to the Penguins or tours to the Great Ocean Road. We keep businesses connected with their customers, other stakeholders, and drive growth, and therefore drive the economy. Victoria prides itself on being the premier event state, but we've been slammed, and there are several issues. The crisis has led to the loss of skilled people and therefore some capacity and capability to manage complex events. Today, we're no longer as attractive for business events as the financial risks are just too great for many companies and many not-for-profit organisations. The Australian business event sector is highly competitive, and Victoria has a terrific track record, but today, we're not well placed. The hesitancy we've seen in vaccination take-up is starting to play out in business willingness to stage events in Victoria. So, what will it take us to get back on our feet? We need to build confidence that events can happen. We need a dedicated Events Victoria task force who can develop clear event guidelines and clarity on what the rules for business events are. What are the capacities for different types of events? Can we serve alcohol? Can people dance? There's a muddle around what can be done and what can't be done. The task force also needs to develop a comprehensive communication strategy focused on delivering the message across the state and nationwide that Victoria is open for events. We need cancellation insurance, which is self-funded and sustainable. And as an industry, we need direct financial support targeted at those who are doing it tough. Those businesses who cannot operate in a lockdown environment, who have significantly reduced income and just who may not survive for many more weeks or months. This is important to me. I want Wise Connections to survive, my team to have jobs, our suppliers and industry colleagues to be successful. But at the moment, it's hard to see how we can keep going under our own steam. And this is important to Victoria. We need support to get this industry back on its feet, driving economic growth in Victoria. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me.
Sue, that was a pleasure to hear from you and Wise Connections, especially the unique impact on your business, but also the whole Victorian event sector. I might just create a speaking list because we have 10 committee members present today. So I might start with Ms. Lovell, Mr. Quilty, then Mr. Jepp, in that order. So one question, please, and if we get an opportunity, we'll come back to ask a second question.
Thanks very much, and thanks very much for your presentation, Susan. Susan, what's needed from the state government to give you the confidence to continue on, to give you the confidence to start planning an event that if it's cancelled at the last minute, you know, obviously you lose huge amounts of money. So what would be needed to give you the confidence to go back into full swing and start planning future events?
It's really about building business in the business community. That's what it's about. I mean, we keep planning, we keep moving, we keep changing. It's the business community who are lacking that confidence and are considering holding events in other places. I think the number one from that perspective is the event cancellation, the COVID cancellation insurance. We can't get cancellation insurance any other way. Many venues, I would say almost all venues, are being really reasonable at moving bookings and not charging cancellation fees, but there are still huge costs to be borne when an event cancels. And I was having these conversations with a client yesterday about what would the cost be, and just the cost to them was horrifying, that so much was at stake. So if there was some sort of insurance which organisations, whether it be event managers or the end clients, pay into a percentage that's underwritten, that would help to give people confidence that if they do need to cancel their event, then they're not going to lose a lot of money. That would, to me, would be the number one factor.
Thank you very much.
I might pass over to Mr. Quilty to ask a question.
Thanks. So how do your clients view holding events in Victoria as compared to other states, and what differences are you noticing organising events in other states as opposed to Victoria?
I'll start by just touching on COVID safe plans, which is a huge part of our work, something we've never had to deal with before. The level of complexity, I guess, in Victoria running events is more extensive than in other states, and that's partly because we've been locked down and we've had more cases here than many other places. So what I'm finding is that clients are just nervous about events running. So we've got events on our books across the country. Many of them are multi-state events, so we're dealing with one client across the country, and we're getting inquiries from them and their stakeholders, whether it be sponsors or actual participants. I've had half a dozen in this morning going, so what about this event in Victoria? Is it going to go ahead? And all of that just trickles down into an uncertainty about, should we go ahead? Should we move it back? Or should we actually just go online? I think the going online, I mean, we're doing this online. It's not ideal. And I think what we're hearing from our clients, but also the end attendees, is people want to be back face to face. And everybody is holding on to that and not just us, the clients are holding on to that. They really want to do it. The appetite is there to do it, but we've got to get through the fear factor of what if we're cancelled. I haven't seen any fear. I haven't spoken to anybody about, oh, what if we go to an event and there's COVID there? I think certainly the clients we're dealing with talking about the COVID safe plans, which are pages and pages of what we do what we're doing to keep people safe. People seem to be quite comfortable with that. It's just the prospect of cancelling. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no. Thank you very much for that. I might pass over to Mr. Jebb and then go to Mr. Davis.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Sue, for being with us today. You spoke in your introduction about, and I'll paraphrase, a growing acceptance that lumping the tourism and events sectors together is no longer appropriate. So what is your view about how we uncouple those two things, because those sectors are often seen as joined at the hip, and how would that uncoupling assist governments and the sector in terms of your uniqueness, particularly in this global pandemic environment?
I understand why they're coupled together. You know, looking from the outside in, you know, we deal with people travelling, we deal with accommodation, we deal with people eating. That's about where it finishes. I think that how you uncouple it, it just needs some clarity on what the different sectors do and what their purpose is, really. You know, is the purpose relaxation, travellers, holidays, or is it business? And I think certainly for me, and my business world I started as a tour operator way back when. So I came from that world, if you like. But the world we live in is about business. It's about business getting together, whether it be associations who are, you know, they could be reaching out to their stakeholders. They're trying to they're working with their stakeholders to work through COVID, whether it's businesses trying to talk to their clients or their salespeople. It's all about business and driving business through those organizations, but also in the broader economy, driving business. And that to me is how I would look at kind of splitting them. Is it vacation or is it business? That's sort of super simplified. I think where it would help us is that, as I touched on, it takes months and months and months of planning for events. Partly from a client perspective, they've got to work out what is the purpose of the event they're having, why are they holding it, and then that trickles down through all the bookings and the logistics. And in this COVID world, we can't just switch on and off again. Again, as I touched on, the work to undo an event isn't just, oh, I'm sorry, we need to cancel the venue. It's cancelling the venue, going back to all the sponsors, going back to all the people who've booked tickets, all the people I mentioned earlier, unravelling it, and then seeing if we can pull it back together again. So it's so complex that I think if it can be seen and people understand the time that it takes to put these events together. I mean, you know, we understand we're in the background. Like I and many of my industry colleagues, we're running around in black clothes. You don't see us. That's the whole point. You're not meant to see us. But to get moving, to stop and then get moving again, to get all the plans in place, it takes longer than it does, I believe, in the tourism industry. And that's not, and no disrespect to them. I believe they're just different, very different.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Mr. Davis.
Can I thank you, Susan, for your presentation and note a number of points that you made, and I want to ask you a question or two about those. The one is you obviously work across different states, and you make the point that Victoria's had traditionally about 12 billion of the $3.7 billion national events economy, if I can describe it that way. So that is a very significant share. Some have called Melbourne and Victoria the events capitals of the nation. Are we at risk of losing that, you know, significant economic and you know, beyond that position of significance in the events economy in that way?
Absolutely, we are. If it becomes too risky and clients are too risk averse to holding events, and I'll talk just business events. I mean, there's the whole major events. You know, everybody knows about those, and them moving around causes people to sort of jump with joy when events have been taken out of Victoria because they've grabbed them from us. But just looking from a business perspective, you know, if your decision is, do I hold it in Victoria or do I hold it, and I'm not going to name any other states, another state, sometimes the decision is easier to do that. And I think that combined with the loss of skills in this industry, particularly in the AV tech side of the world here, we've lost a lot of people who have worked for many, many years as freelancers who are fantastic at what they do. They travel around the country, they travel around the world. If they're not here to help us run all these events, we're going to struggle. So I think it's very multi-layered, but absolutely we're at risk. The events will go, they'll go north. they'll go east.
And we'll lose some of those remarkable people with their skill set.
We've already lost them. We've already lost many. There are people who, as I say, particularly in the tech and AV side of the industry, a lot of the workforce is casual by their choice. They do get to work for lots of different people, lots of different events, but they have just disappeared. Their work has disappeared. They weren't caught by JobKeeper, so therefore they were left on their own. And many of them have gone off to work in other areas. And to be honest, with the hours and the stress that we put up with, willingly, you know, we love our industry. Many of them have stepped away and kind of gone, 9 to 5, that sounds nice. I think I might just stay here. So we are absolutely at risk if we can't start to bed something down where there's a bit more certainty about events actually taking place.
Thank you for that. Very informative in relation to the event sector more broadly. Mr. Barton has a question, and then I'll go to Dr. Cumming.
Sorry, Chair. Thanks, Susan. We've just got some news coming through, and news of an extension for another 7 days, which is, no one wanted to hear that, but that is what we've got. Earlier today, I was going through I just got on the tail end of some advice what the Federal Treasury has given the federal government. They're expecting, we can expect 3 weeks of lockdowns every quarter and for the next 12 months. That's what they're telling the feds. I'm also hoping they're telling the feds they've got to put their hand in their pocket and support those states which are struggling as well. I just want to talk about vaccinations, about confidence, and how that would impact the events industry. Did you think, I'm not in the government, contrary to people's belief, I'm not, but do you think it would help? Do you think it would help people's confidence? And I certainly hope it would help their confidence of the government to run things if we have a much higher level of vaccination. And we've certainly seen comments from Qantas, for instance. If you want to fly on a Qantas, you're going to have to be vaccinated. The cruise industry, that's heading in that direction. Should the events industry think about that, maybe? I don't know.
Well, I've already had my first vaccination, so that's where I stand on it. Absolutely. I think that a faster rollout of vaccinations across the country is really what will help us get moving again, because I think that will reduce the fear that people have. And I think we've seen that. I mean, in Victoria, I don't have the numbers, but the number of people going to get vaccinated has just, it's an upward cycle. And I think there is fear out there as to, oh, what if we can get vaccinations around the country rolled out, I think that will help. Whether we mandate, I don't know that, I mean, all my team, I can pretty well say, would all happily get vaccinated if it meant we could keep working. I'm not sure about mandating vaccinations. That's a whole, that's a very political issue. I'm not a politician either. So.
No.
But I think absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely it would, because it's just trying to, we know COVID is not going to go away in a hurry. What's happening around the rest of the world has proven that. The fact, you know, if we have people coming into the country, people will bring it in. And we need to reduce the risk of people getting very sick and going to hospital. And I think that whole reducing the risk and people going, okay, we know it's here, it's in the community, but we're actually safe, I think will help events get back.
Yeah, 20,000 people vaccinated yesterday. Good lot for Victoria. Well done.
Thank you, Ryan. Dr. Cumming, Mr. Talamas.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Susan, for your presentation as well as the questions that you've answered thus far. My question to you is this: do you believe a lot of the events could have still gone ahead with COVID-safe plans and guidelines, that you could have actually kept your staff and the public safe? And do you believe that more people need to be taught say, aseptic techniques, so they actually understand the cross-contamination and be very aware of some medical advice on how to actually make sure that events can go ahead in a COVID-safe way?
Yes, I do. I mean, lockdown is the thing that's causing us the biggest problem. We've got every event we have planned in a live space has a COVID safe plan. And in Victoria, I mean, we've got one for the exhibition I referred to that was cancelled, is probably 40 pages. It sits under the venue plan, and we absolutely COVID safe marshals, PPE where required, sanitizer, notices, decals on the floor. We're in the events industry, we're very process driven, and we follow rules because we have to, and we look at risk. Risk is what even before COVID, we've lived with risk. Always. There's always a risk of something happening, someone falling off a ladder, something falling down, people not being able to get there. So we've lived with this before COVID, and all that COVID has done has really just ramped it up, what we have to do. So absolutely, I think if we have an event that's one of the national ones that's meant to happen in a few weeks in Victoria, we have our COVID safe plan for that. We would obviously ramp that up because the plans, they're not just written and forgotten, they're written and you just keep evolving them. You would ramp that up, and absolutely I think we could run safe events.
Thank you for that, Sue. I might just pass on to one of our other committee members to ask a question because I'm just aware of the time. I might actually pass over to Mr. Medic and Mrs. MacArthur. Mr. Medic, do you have a question?
I do. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your presentation. One very quick question. If Victoria had not gone into lockdown, if we decided that, let's just deal with the one we currently have, for instance, if we hadn't gone into lockdown, if we've decided as a state to that we could handle this, that it was all under control and we had all these other measures in place, but still all the other states decided to lock their borders with Victoria. Where do you see that having the effect then? What do you see that the solution to that is? Do you think that regardless of that, that people from the events who booked events with you should still be able to come in and do what they do under your COVID safe plans and then go home? Or do you think that those other states have got a right to say, well, you know, we don't think you should be coming back because you're at risk of bringing that disease back to our state?
It's a very broad question. I think the lockdown of states is really problematic. I understand why they're doing it. You know, my 89-year-old parents live in the UK. It's gone through there. I totally understand it. But for a country to lock its citizens out of state to state, I think is a problem. I think something like the hot spots, I think is totally valid. It's difficult for me to answer. I mean, should people be able to come and go? I mean, ideally, yes. I mean, you know, ideally, absolutely, yes. I mean, the event that we're running on Friday evening, we can't go. So we're working out a plan to do that, how we can make that happen. That client, 2 of their senior people cannot also go. One's based in Queensland and one's in New South Wales, but they were in Victoria for 2 days. They now can't go to that event that's not even in Victoria. So it's this ripple effect that just reaches out, and how we can keep the country open, keep people moving around absolutely in a safe way, you know, wearing masks, doing everything we have to do, getting vaccinated, I think will help events keep running, and I think will help business keep growing. You know, listening to the news this morning about where the Victorian economy, or how the overall economy is doing, but how the Victorian economy is doing is kind of, it's going to cause us problems.
My apologies for making that a somewhat leading question, because it was going down the path of, are we asking the Commonwealth to take control of border closures so that the states don't have that control themselves?
Yeah. Thank you very much for that question and answer. I might pass over for our final question to Mrs. MacArthur. I'm aware that our next witnesses, I believe, are ready. So, Mr. MacArthur, final question.
That is an interesting prospect if we could do away with the powers of state premiers, and we would be one Australia with no borders and lines on a map, and we could all move freely. It sounds absolutely how it should be operating. So I'd be interested in going down that path. But can you tell me, it seems when governments, send out an edict that something will be locked down from midnight the next day, we've heard from the hospitality industry that often means disposing of tons of food, and people having been employed as casual staff are all put off. How does that impact you and your industry, both financially and in a sort of personal sense, if you're given 24 hours notice to shut something down? What is the financial and personal impact?
Financial, from a business perspective, is there will be much more work involved in, as I talked about earlier, unraveling everything, cancelling, changing really quickly. I think from a business perspective, for the people that we deal with, the suppliers that we deal with, the AV companies, the staging companies, the riggers, all of those people will instantly have no work. Now, if they're casual, obviously no work, no pay. For my team, as an example, we'll keep working, but we'll keep working probably over the weekend, trying to sort things out. So there's more work that's not being covered. As I say, for some other organisations that are sort of along the track from us that we have as suppliers, they will lose work straight away, and there'll be nothing to replace it. From a personal perspective, it's really stressful. It is really stressful, waiting. Literally emails coming in going, is this event going ahead? And I've gone back to my team and just said, should we just wait till this afternoon and see? You just can't plan. And we're planners, we're list peoples, we're planners. So we sort of have this list sitting here waiting of all the things we're going to have to do, whether it's going ahead or whether it's not going ahead. Having such short notice is problematic. It puts a lot of stress on, because you're trying to still work on the events that are in the future, fingers crossed, July, August, the events will happen, whilst you're trying to change and push back all the events that are being cancelled. So it's, as I say, for us, we're still working, but for many, there's no work. And the stress, I think, throughout the industry is huge.
So in one event, would you be able to put a financial figure on it? Hundreds of thousands of dollars in costs?
The next witnesses are here already. So I know Mr. Talamas and yourself, I'm sure, will have additional questions. On that point, I just want to thank Sue and Wise Connections for their contribution to our committee hearing process. If we do have additional questions, would it be okay if we just emailed you directly?
Yes, of course, yes. No problem.
No, thank you, because I know because of the time, we've got 7 witnesses today, and when our next witness is already waiting. Really